Morning, everyone. Yeah, I was talking to Jerry this morning because it's my favorite Sunday when we have fellowship and everybody brings food and then we get to hang out in the afternoon. And then my least favorite Sundays, which is when Dan's gone and I got to fill in up here. So it's going to be a perfectly neutral Sunday for me. So I'm thinking. Uh, yeah, so we are, Brother Dan is out of town this week. Yeah, I believe he's traveling for work, right? Yeah, it makes me sad. You don't want to throw out words like absentee father and that kind of thing, but he does have children at home. It's sad when when work takes somebody away. All right. So this morning we will be continuing going chapter by chapter through Luke. We'll start out in Luke 21 this morning. Can anybody kind of help summarize where we're sitting at in the narrative of Christ's life at this point in Luke 21? What's been leading up to this point? We're right at the end. So yeah, we're actually just a few days out even from the crucifixion. So he is winding up his ministry here on earth. He's preparing himself. He's entered into Jerusalem already for the last time. He is just a few days away. Actually, I think the next chapter kicks off with Judas and the betrayal and everything. So he is right at the very end of his ministry. So like I said, the setting, he is back into Jerusalem, right? How did he arrive in Jerusalem? Chapter 2 ago. That's right. So he came in, right? He was on a donkey, entered in, kind of known as a triumphal entry, coming through, received as the Savior. It says in Luke 19 that it was because of his mighty works is why everybody kind of received him that way as he came in. And as mentioned, he was riding on a donkey. What's the significance of riding on a donkey? Humbleness, right? Not coming in as a conqueror. Coming as a king, but humble, right? So not conquering, being accepted. Ezra? Oh, Israel. Oh, I see. Yeah, Israel is not to ride horses. Okay. Oh, did somebody tell Solomon that? Did anybody tell Solomon? I feel like horses and stables is kind of his thing. Yep. So Christ has come into Israel now. He came in as, again, kind of being accepted by all the people there. Again, it calls out his mighty works. As he come in, we can kind of lay out some of his kind of practices towards the end of it. So it seems like he spent most of his days teaching in the temple, and then in the evening time he would cross over the valley and stay at the over on the Mount of Olives over there. Right, kind of reading ahead, we know most of his time in the evenings was spent at Bethany, just on the other side of the Mount of Olives, and of course the Garden of Gethsemane, where they found him when Judas went to go betray him. And it seems like a repeat that his days were spent in the temple. So that's where Luke 21 opens up, is he is in the temple during the day doing his teaching and his ministering to those who come to listen to him. Of course, we know his animosity with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they're trying to constantly trip him up and trap him, which was a lot of the last chapter. So here we kick off, and he is in the temple. And let's see if somebody could read, again, we kind of do small chunks, verses 1 through 4. All right, so again, we're here in the temple, and as he's doing his teaching and preaching, this seems to be just a continuation of what we read about in chapter 20. So, of course, when this was all written down, there was no chapter divisions or anything like that. So, just before this, he's in there talking to the scribes and the Pharisees, and then it seems like, and immediately kind of he looked up and he saw the says rich men over there, and they're casting in their gifts and their offerings into the temple, right? And if he looked over there and noticed it, does it seem like it was something that was they were doing humbly, right? Putting in their donations, their gifts. Exactly, like a big show of it. So it was something that they weren't trying to hide, right? There's something he's called out to them multiple times already, that they have, they do it more for their appearance, the appearance of men, versus what actually is meant, right, as a heart donation, kind of a something that's going to be a sacrifice. So as he's sitting here watching this, then he sees a certain poor widow come up, and she casts in 2 mites. So mites is obviously it's a small coin. It's a form of money. I wanted to look it up. Obviously, that's something we don't use today. And in Nave's Topical Bible, it says 1 mite is equal to about 1/5 of a penny. So it's a very, very small, right? And I even looked it up. So then Nave's Topical, who called that out, was written right around 1900. So the equivalent would be about 8 cents today. So this woman had 16 cents worth of valuables on her, and she put it in. And reading through it, is that just what she had on her pockets? Like she just went to the temple and that's, oh, I forgot to grab my checkbook, so I'll put in my 2 mites. Is that the way we read it here? No. That was it. It says all of her livelihood, right? Like that was everything. So it wasn't that was just all she had on her. That was literally all her belongings. That was everything that she had, and she gave it into the temple as a personal kind of sacrifice, right, for what she had. Why is it, so I think we've all been to points, I know I have too, where, you just don't have any money. You got to borrow to kind of get from point A to point B. But at least in my case, I always knew that money was coming, right? I could kind of, okay, I got to get through the next couple weeks, and then whatever, my paycheck will come in or whatever it may be. I've never had it where this is literally everything and I have no line of sight for anything else coming to me, right? That's an awful scary place to be if that's all that you have. And to be able to be trusting and faithful enough to put all that to the Lord, right? And that's a strong faith, right? And that's what Christ is calling out, right? Because obviously, monetary-wise, what she was putting in, they wouldn't even notice it, right? I mean, it would just be in there. But for her, that was literally every bit that she had, and that's what he's calling out, is her great faith in her trustingness and her willingness to sacrifice on behalf of the Lord. Yes. Yeah. Me, just like these other ones, are out of my abundance, right? I mean, I make my electricity's not at any point worried about getting shut off, and everything else, that's all taken care of, and then I write it. And that's not what's called out here, right? Is the absolute first and only thing that she did with her money was give it all, right? She had 2. She could have easily put 1 in and, well, God will understand. I'm going to keep this other one on me just in case. I don't know what 1 mite would get you, but I can't imagine much. Maybe a meal, who knows? But no, she gave every bit of it. Right, correct. Yeah, then go ahead, because now you're safe. You got it, right? Yep. Yes, agreed. Yeah, which is why this woman is even that much more an example for us all to look up to. The other thing that kind of stood out to me thinking about it, right, is uh, he specifically called her out a widow, right? Why would that kind of be significant? Yeah, she had nobody. So it's not like she's a landowner and he decided to throw everything in, knowing that harvest was coming or anything like that, right? Uh, Belongings, there's been none of that she would have had herself. Nobody to take care of her, nobody to kind of be her safety net. It seems like this woman was all on her own, and yet she gave up everything that she had. Right? That's pretty incredible. And there was no prosperity teacher standing there yelling at her next to her, saying that this is good because God's going to multiply you 1,000-fold or anything like that. Right? This is just her and her own willingness to sacrifice what she had. Okay. Anything else on the this woman here in the temple before we move on? All right. If somebody would read the next few verses here, let's do 5 through 7. All right, so here is a question that is given to him. So this is potentially something that could have happened more than once, but this is kind of commonly referred to as the Olivet Discourse. It doesn't say here that specifically he left the temple, and some of the wording is a little bit different. This is also recounted, I didn't write down, but it's Matthew 24 and 25, I think, and then Mark 13, I read several times. But it's either this was, in the other Gospels, he leaves out of the temple, and again, like we talked about, his pattern at this time was to go over to the Mount of Olives across the valley, and it's called out to just look at the temple, look at the amazement of this beautiful building that's sitting over here, and then Christ kind of goes into what's going to happen here in the future. So potentially this is something that was asked of him more than just once. Again, Luke doesn't tell us that he left the temple at this point here, so maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he's asked a question, right? So they're talking about the temple and just the magnificence of it, and what does Christ say is going to happen to this temple? Yeah, it's going to be taken down, right? It's going to be, which at this point would have been so unbelievable to these Jews here, right? Because how long had this temple been there? Maybe not in its current state. Yeah, so this one here was, if anybody remembers from the Zechariah study we done, this is what they built when they came out of there, right? So they came out of Persian captivity. There was a remnant that kind of came over there. They built a small version of this temple, and then in secular history, this is called Herod's temple, because he would have. Yes, this one here would have been Herod's temple. Yes. Yeah, there's a little bit of whether the one from Zechariah would have been enlarged and renovated and encapsulated in this large one, or if it was substituted, as a temporary fix while Herod was building this grand one. Either way, we call this the second temple, and it would have been either the same building or not. It would have had the same purpose as the second temple there when they came back from Persian captivity. And this was known in, again, secular writings for what a great, magnificent temple this was, right? Everybody talks about the way the sun kind of gleamed off of the gold and everything out there, just a beautiful marvel of a temple. And yeah, correct. Yes, yeah, he enlarged the entire platform that's up there. Yes, yeah, he's known as a great builder. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff from Herod that he built that's still standing over there today. But yeah, this would have been just a marvel of a place.
Each of those stones at 570 or so tons. The size of it was 45 feet by 12 feet by 12 feet approximately, which if you look at the side wall over there, this building is 50 feet long. So the stone would have been almost the full length of this building. And the top of that wall is 12 foot. And then 12 feet in. That's how big each of those stones were. How in the world did they do that? That would have been one stone out of many that we used to build the Temple Mount.
Yeah, yeah, they weren't little bricks for sure. And
You can say what you want about all the other pyramids and all, but this was an amazing feat.
certainly was. Yeah, again, Herod himself was, there was a multitude of things, right? What's that man-made mountain that he has just right outside of Jerusalem, right? An incredible fortress that they built out there. Yeah, I don't think it's Masada, but yeah, I mean, I didn't look it up, but it's just one of them it's right outside of Jerusalem. It's a giant man-made mountain that Herod built. But anyway, yeah, he was an incredible builder, and it was just unbelievable to those at this time who was listening to Christ tell them that here before too long, this thing's going to be just a heap of rubble. There won't be one stone standing on another. So then, of course, that leads into the next question of like, well, how's that going to happen, right? And that's where we left off. So if somebody wants to read verses 8 through 19. Through 19.
Some of you shall they cause to be put to death, and ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But there shall not be a hair of your head taken. In your patience possesses this.
All right, thank you, Jordan. All right, so here is Jesus' answer to their question, right? So their question was twofold when he talks about the temple, and it is, when will these things be, and what will be the signs when these things shall come to pass? So then Jesus gets into it, and when you're reading it, it's a little tough, but it's kind of a twofold prophecy, right? He talks about things that are going to happen kind of relatively near term to where they're at, and then things are going to happen farther out. So as we're reading it, verse 12 is kind of the divider of that one. So verse 12 of what we just read starts out as, but before all these, so the things that he's telling them, before those things happen, then these nearer terms will happen. So it's almost reversed of how you would tell it kind of chronologically, right? He tells the things that are going to happen farther out, and then he tells you what's going to happen, again, relatively near to where they're at. All right, so what's kind of his answer to them when they're asked? Yep.
I didn't want to go to Israel. Tom McElmurray talked me into it. It because it did more for me than I could ever imagine. And that place that you see now, that they go down to the foundation called the Wailing Wall, that wasn't there. That's been excavated.
Yes.
All of the stones was leveled off into there. Archaeologists and searchers have dug that out. So that happened just very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with well, being delivered up to the synagogue, chapter 7 of Acts. Stephen was taken.
Yes.
Taken by the synagogue of Libertines, and basically they couldn't argue his points. He was so clear and precise, and they took him before the council, and the council decided to stone him. So all these things have been happening right on down, just like Jesus said. And he said, "Don't worry about it."
Yep. Yeah, well, to your first point, there's all types of pictures of when, in the 40s and 50s, when they moved back to the land, kind of how it looked at that time, and then what it looks like now. And everything was overgrown and dirt up to, the top of the wall, like you mentioned. It's all excavated out and ramps and all types of stuff built. It's pretty amazing in a short amount of time what they were able to find and excavate. And then, yeah, moving on down here. So, yeah, of course, he talks about the things that are going to happen near term. So the stoning of Stephen was one of the first ones I'd thought of that, yeah, he talks about them that, don't think about what you're going to say, because I think the entirety of chapter 7 is just Stephen recanting all their history, right? That's, and it was convicted them enough that they decided to take him out and stone him. You also have Peter and John in Acts chapter 4, when they get arrested and they're taken before the leadership. Another example of just being given things to say, of course. Yeah, they sure know a lot of scripture for fishermen, huh? It also talks about that, not a hair of your head will be hurt, right? So obviously that's not in the case of Stephen. So what does he mean by that? Does he mean that they all got an invisible force field on them, that they're going to be completely protected and just live forever? So the ones that he's talking about here are his apostles, his disciples, and I think that's until they essentially fulfill their purpose, right? So you have Stephen, that was what his goal was. So he was to go up there to convict them, to put them in their heart, and then, at the end of it, he asked for forgiveness for those who are stoning him. Because I think a good example of that is when Peter gets arrested, right, and he's in jail, and they plan to go ahead and cut his head off, then in the middle of the night, an angel lets him out, right, and he goes out and goes back to the other people. I think that's a good example of the intervention there, because his time wasn't ready, right? He still had to go to Cornelius and all them out there in Acts 10, to lead them in to be a witness in Acts 15 at the Jerusalem Council. Yeah, I have that written down as, yeah, it's church tradition. It's not in there, but yeah, potentially, or the way it sounds is he was boiled in oil, didn't die, so that's why they exiled him out to Patmos, because Revelation was not yet written. And then you look at Acts 12, right, where James gets beheaded, right, because he essentially served his purpose. So we all have a plan and a purpose and an appointed time, and I think that's an example of what he's saying is, until that time, nothing's going to hurt you, but that doesn't mean, exactly, I don't want to say hurt you, right, because Paul had the thorn in the flesh that constantly aggravated him, but again, it's essentially we all have a purpose to do. Keep your head down. You had mentioned it, that in verse 19 is, your patience possesses ye your souls. What's
what we want to do. We think, what died young? Well, we would say, you're not wrong,
That's right.
and say for purpose. And it's all. But he looked at it when our purpose is complete. Now, he may give us
Yep.
but we think in terms selfishly, our own life, our own possessions, and that's how we gauge our desires in living our life. He's not looking at it that way. And when he speaks in these terms, he is talking about within his purpose, not ours.
I agree. I don't want to usurp Brother Jim's story, right? But he talks about someone you knew in the past, right, who they was in a horrible semi-truck accident, right, and end up passing away. And I think how many times I've heard you tell that story. So yeah, the tragedy of that, but then how many people has that affected for the Lord in the past, right? You telling that story. So that person, even though their time was cut short and all the good they could have done, right? How much more are they doing at this point by you continue to tell that story, others, right? The impact and the influence that would have for the glory of God.
You think of Stephen. I mean, Stephen obviously was a strong deacon in the church of Jerusalem. And you
Yes.
think, well, what if he had lived? How many lives could he have touched? And yet, his testimony, his witness that's recorded in the scriptures gave lasting testimony through the writing of his word.
Yeah.
Words. And
How-
so it's carried down through the centuries.
How many people have an entire chapter of this word dedicated just to what they're speaking, right? I mean, you have to be a pretty incredible person for them to carve out a full chapter of your dialogue that's going to impact others. And we know it had an impact right then, because they couldn't even stand it enough to let him live another day. They took him right out and stoned him right there. And again, just the kind of individual he was right before he was received up in the glory, right? He asked for forgiveness for him. They didn't know what they were doing by rejecting Christ and stoning him there. All right. Anything else on this point? That's very good. All right. Well, then if we want to move on to 20 through 28. Thank you, Justine. Yep, that's enough. Oh, wait, no, sorry, keep going. Now, thank you, Justine. All right, so Jesus continues to kind of tell them things that are coming, right? So we again have, it sounds like a near-term kind of prophecies and then farther out kind of prophecies. So the first chunk here where I first jumped in is kind of the nearer term items that we have going on. So most people know, right, Christ died around 33-ish, 31, something along those lines, AD. As Brother Jim mentioned earlier, it was 70 AD was the Roman sacking and destruction of Jerusalem when the temple kind of came down. So these events are a little bit less than 40 years or so away. What it sounds like, right? The army's coming in and people having to flee out of there, and Jerusalem kind of given over to the Gentiles. Does anybody have any thoughts, anything we want to talk about on the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled? The time we're now given over to. Yeah, mainly. Correct. Yeah, that's, so yeah, this of course comes up in here. It was one that I was kind of looking into. I know there's multiple interpretations of it, right? But whereas kind of trodden down by Gentiles, yeah, some people who think that's around the time of Daniel when Nebuchadnezzar came in, and then since then, Jerusalem has pretty much been under some type of occupation of Gentiles and all that. There was, when you read in Romans 11, that's before it talks to the two witnesses coming, you know, John in the vision is given a reed to measure, right? And they specifically said to leave out the outer courts, right? Because it's left to the Gentiles. And that's 40 and 2 months. So I don't know if that tells you how long it'll be. Obviously, at the time that we were talking when Revelation was written, there was no temple there. So this is looking out to a future. So I was just kind of curious on if anybody had any thoughts on that, because yeah, that's one that kind of sticks out when you're reading it. So again, this seems to be here kind of the nearer term stuff. Moving on down to the next chunk of it was 25 to 28, and that is pretty clearly speaking about the Lord coming back at the end of it, right? And those.
Yeah. Basically, this is what I've always thought. They sign in every generation since then.
Yes.
There's been some things that remain. The first place, every time I see a really said they're not at all. They've been consistently increasing. And every generation sees this and reminds us of it. And Matthew says that there have been wars and rumors of wars. I can't remember a time on purpose that some.
Yeah, we didn't get into it in detail, but back a little ways in chapter or verse 11 rather, he talks about earthquakes in diverse places, famines, pestilence, fearful sights, all that stuff is coming. So yes, and as you mentioned, a reminder. So in this next section, if somebody wants to read 29 to 33, he'll clear some of that up for us. One more, 33. Yeah, so here we have a parable, and he hasn't given us a parable in a little bit, so maybe a refresher, what's a parable? Yeah, it's a comparison, right? So it's a way to kind of help illustrate specifically spiritual ideas with something that is well known, so it's something that we know. So a lot of these people are farmers, obviously they're outside most of the day, right? There's no sitting inside and just hanging out all day, right? You're outside, you see things. So weather. So in here he talks about the same way that you see the sign that summer is coming, right? Because you can look at the trees and you see the way that they bloom and the way that they're starting to get fruits on them and bud. You know that summer is coming, right? So the same way that you see these signs that he's been predicting, that Brother Jim was just talking about, is the same way that you know that these things are just about to happen, right? The way you see the increase in earthquakes throughout history. All those things are leading up to these events that he's talking about. And if you pay attention to the signs, right, if you go and hang out in the basement and bury your head all day long, you don't know if it's summer or winter, whatever else is going on outside, right? You kind of hide from what's going on in the world, and you don't know necessarily, again, what's going on out there. You don't know this. You wouldn't know the seasons. You wouldn't know the times. The same thing here. That if you just go and bury your head in the world and don't pay attention to the events and what is clearly laid out for us, that is very evidently coming, right? Then you just wouldn't know that. Yes. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, correct. It's very easy to ignore things that are not happening to you directly, right? To kind of go on about your day because, well, I still got to keep my lights on and I still got to do this, that, and the other. But yeah, if you pay attention to it, I mean, there's massive persecution all throughout this world for people just based on, senseless things, what they believe, and that.
Something easy to see is the virus.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a sign of it, right? I mean, we have a whole horse in Revelation dedicated just to spreading that. Um, all right, dear, can you read 34 to 38? We'll finish it out. All right, so here we have Jesus finishing out his teachings for the day, and similar to his parable, right? He talks about paying attention, and I wanted to make sure Joanne read that because she was practicing surfeiting all morning, so I wanted to make sure that that she got a chance to show off, like she knew what she was, how it was going to go. So, what is that then? What is I kind of jumped a little bit ahead. So what is he saying here? What's Christ telling us? Yep. Yeah, be sober, be vigilant, right? Just paying attention to what's going on. So the same thing he talks about with this parable, he just reiterates it with his teaching that, you'll know these things are coming. You'll know that this book is true. You'll know what's going on if you pay attention to the things that's going on in the world. And if you are just solely sucked up in your day-to-day stuff, the things of this world that we feel are important here to us now, but in the grand scheme of everything in eternity, it's nothing. But if we are not paying attention, if we are, what's a surfeiting, dear? What's the definition? Yeah, overindulgence, gluttony, that kind of thing. Yeah, it talks a lot about the effects of it, right? Like, yeah, the negative effects. Yeah, I think we all did. I could have read it in my notes. I'm sure. I know I wrote it in here somewhere. I just have to look it up. Oh yeah, there you go. The King James Bible Companion, surfeiting, is excess food or drink overindulgence. So again, it's just not being. He's given us signs so that we know what's upcoming, and if we choose to ignore those signs because of we're just stuck in the little minutia of the day, then we are not heeding the signs that he's given us.
So we're gonna be
Sounds like, yeah. Yep. Zero surfeiting going on here today, you guys. Make sure of it. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's not a day to reverence or anything like that, and to be thankful for getting a day off work or whatever it may be, right? It's just it's another excuse to go and just do whatever you want in this world to temporarily satisfy your earthly pleasures. Yeah, we just passed that, right? No, yeah, it's a yeah. Again, it's just another excuse, and everybody looks for them, right? I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people are excited just for Friday to roll around because they don't have to be here on Saturday and all their plans. And then here at the end of it, so it just jumps back into the narrative that in that time of day of the teaching in the temple. So again, that was kind of his daily routine was to teach in the temple during the day, and then at night he would go out to the Mount of Olives. We even know after the Passover that says they sang a hymn and they went out to the Mount of Olives. So this was just kind of a repeat pattern for him at this stage in his life. And that's what he did. So he went out to the Mount of Olives, and it says that everybody would come early to hear him the next day. So we know, again, in the morning time, his plan was to go back over to the temple, and everybody who was obviously interested in the kind of people he described here as wanting to know the things, wanting to understand times and the signs that were given to them, they made sure that they woke up early and they met him out there so they could continue.
It doesn't say it, but when he went out and prayed.
Right. Well, and that's yeah, when obviously Judas betrayed him, right? Like that's where he went to take the soldiers, because that's where he knew that they would be. Again, I was trying to think of like some of the things that happened in between now and the crucifixion to kind of figure out where he'd be. And we know that he, Mary of Bethany, right? We anointed him with the oil. So Bethany's just right on the other side of the Mount of Olives. Again, we know that he was found in the Garden of Gethsemane. After the Passover, they went out to the Mount of Olives after they sang a hymn and prayed. So yeah, this seems like his routine. So yeah, almost assuredly he went out there, and I have to imagine he's praying for all those who heard the things that he was teaching throughout the day, that they would see and understand and pay attention, and not just be consumed by the lust of this life and the things that are going on here, to be attentive to the things that's important, right? Because everything here is very short. I could have the grandest time here, but eternity is a whole lot longer than my 80 years I'm going to have at this place, right? You know, that's where we need to be, obviously storing up our treasures for things to come. That's where we need to be putting our time and our efforts in. It's nothing that you can do here. It's all about your focus on Christ and the sacrifice that he had, right? That's what's leading up to this, is the sacrifice to take on all of our sin debt, right? Something we can't pay for ourselves, that we would turn it over to him, understand that no matter how good Travis is not good enough to get into heaven. There's got to be, I got to have him take my sins for me, right? And that's why he paid for it. It was nothing that he did. It was 100% me, my sins, put him there. Anything else that we need to go over? Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, they couldn't just give up a day of not working to kind of go and listen to him, right? So it's, if they wanted to hear him before work, yeah, that's a really good point, right? Yeah, they'd have to go and they'd have to listen to him before they could go and provide themselves a living or something. But what is it? Give us this day our daily bread, right? That's how you start the morning, start the day off. So, I'll go about our day. Amen to that. All right. Anybody got anything else? Yep. Yep. Screaming to have him crucified. The ones who, yeah, just a few days earlier were throwing out palm branches and stuff so he didn't have to touch the dirt, right? Now all of a sudden they turn against him. That's right. That's true. Yep. Mob mentality. Everybody getting sucked into it. All right. Thank you everyone for your participation this morning.